Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Cokerhook. So this evening we're going to have a real interesting conversation. I don't know how many of you that are viewing have heard the name Napoleon Hill. He was in the early 20th century an individual who wrote a number of books, Think and Grow Rich with Peace of Mind, some other things, and he started an activity to try to help individuals with success principles. And one of the fundamental principles that he talked about was something that he referred to as a mastermind group, which today we often refer to as peer counseling groups or what have you. And that's the primary subject matter of our conversation today. And I'm very pleased to have with me today Mr. Glenn Perkins, who's the president of the Renaissance Executive Forums here in Silicon Valley. Glenn, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Dave. I'm glad to be here. It's a subject that I love to talk about.
Well, I'm glad, because this is what I was real interested in having us dig into this some, because this concept is something that I have been familiar with for a long time and have had, I don't know, start and stop kind of efforts to try to implement. And it's something that I think a lot of people maybe don't fully appreciate or understand what it really is and how it can work. It's a business tool, but it's not just a business tool. These kinds of forum activities are for almost any kind of endeavor. And so I was hoping that we could dive into that in some detail. But before you start talking about it, I want the audience to know a little bit more about you, because you have a very intriguing background, and seeing how you got to this point, I think, is very useful.
I don't know where to start, so I'll just start at the beginning. It's always a good place to start. My professional career started after I got out of school. I studied mechanical engineering at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And when I came out of school, I worked primarily in the DoD business, Department of Defense. I worked for subcontractors for General Electric Company. I worked for a small gearing company called Aircraft Gear. And I moved to California in 1985 to work for a company called Westinghouse in Sunnyvale.
There you go.
Quick story, it was too cold in Chicago, and Westinghouse was looking for engineers in Sunnyvale, with the sunny in quotes.
There you go. Hey, that works.
So out here, I came out as an engineer and worked in primarily building up the manufacturing processes to build components for nuclear submarines.
So now, were you doing this as a team leader of sorts, or were you just one of the guys on the line at that time?
I came out as an engineer. I quickly moved into engineering management, and finally moved into program management. Before my career was over, I ended up running the facility that I came out as an entry engineer in 1985.
Nice.
I retired from Northrop Grumman at that time, who had bought it from Westinghouse, in 2012, and started the peer consulting business shortly thereafter.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about some of the experiences you had while you were with Northrop Grumman. I think you and I touched upon this when we had lunch the other day, because I'm interested in understanding to what degree a large corporation implements this kind of strategies, these peer counseling kind of strategies, within a larger organization. Did you experience that? Or was it you sure wished it had been there, or how did that work out? I sure wished it had been there, would be a best way of describing that. There were many support systems with peers, primarily within the corporation. So many of the activities that you talked about were all centered around processes and experiences that were built up from inside the organization. Okay.
One of the primary benefits of an advisory board or a mastermind group is being able to get experiences and insights from people who are outside of your current environment.
Not part of that specific group. Then.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And why is that an advantage?
Well, there's many advantages to that, but the one that I like to think primarily is you get so close to the business you're in, you become the expert, you see things through one set of eyes or one lens, and people who don't know anything about your business can actually provide some clarity and some perspectives that you don't see from inside the day-to-day operations. Although people may think that you can't get advice from others because they don't know your industry or your business, actually that's not the case. Personnel issues can be common across all kinds of industries. Growth challenges can be common across all kinds of industries.
Sure.
Customer relations can be common across all kinds of industries. So it's the perspective and insight from somebody outside your industry that can actually provide a differentiator or an advantage to you compared to your peers who don't have that outside perspective.
Very cool. All right. So it sounds like being able to have the opportunity to engage with others in different environments, different industry groups, can actually be beneficial to you. And does it make any difference, Glenn, whether I'm a relatively new company starting up and I've got a consulting business, and this guy over here has got his company's been around for 50 years and he's a $500 million company and he's in manufacturing? I mean, is there any kind of correlation tied to where you are in that evolution of company?
It does make a difference, and you have to be very, very careful in either choosing a peer group, an advisory board, a mastermind group to join, or if you're running one, in selecting the members very, very carefully. So there's a couple of principles that you want to use. One is the businesses should be of similar levels of complexity. Maybe one's in distribution, and others in manufacturing, and others in software, but they've got similar numbers of employees. They may be in the same geographical areas, even though they're in completely different industries. The age group of the members should be somewhat correlated. You don't want a bunch of Gen Ys and a bunch of baby boomers in the same type of a peer group. So there are broad constraints that you use to form the group, but diversity is better. Does
it also, or would one of those considerations be the kind of demographic your ideal client is? Would that be a relevant component?
Typically not. Typically not. When you're trying to get insight from someone else, what they really need to understand is a little bit about you, i.e. what are your core values, what's important to you as a leader, what are the principles and values you're trying to build into your company, a little bit about your business model so that they know the leverage points, and then what's the challenge that you have, and what have you tried to do to overcome that, so they can provide feedback. One of the advantages of an advisory board or a forum is that members get to learn about each other. They know each other over a period of time, and so the trust level and the fact that people know that you have their best interest at heart becomes a very, very key factor in having them open up, share the issues and challenges they have, and receive feedback and something that they can use.
Very interesting. So when you put a group like this together, or join a group like this, is there like an optimum size or something? Is this a sort of thing that it makes sense to have 25, 30 people in, or is it maybe 3 or 4 people, or is there a sweet spot? There is a sweet spot, and it's between 10 and 15 people, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is no matter who's in the group, if they're a business leader, they have constraints and problems that come up, and everybody's not going to make every session. Right.
So you want to have 10 to 15 so that you have 8 or 9, 10 people at every meeting. So that's very, very important. You have a critical mass. Number 2, you don't want to have too many members where you can't address each individual's issues either at each meeting or at least at every other meeting, or they'll feel like they're contributing, but they're not getting anything back out of the session. So you have to have a critical mass, and you have to be able to address everybody's issues on a fairly regular basis in order for it to have value for them.
You know, as you talk about that, and I think about some of the reading I have done and the efforts that I have had personally in trying to participate in something like this, it does make sense, this thought of making sure that you are receiving as well as contributing, because I guess not the whole purpose, but one of the purposes of this is to be able, as either a business owner or whatever the endeavor is, whether it's in social services or churches or nonprofits or whatever, you've got a challenge and you haven't figured out how to solve it. You need to have somebody that you can talk to about that, and that's what you're suggesting, is that it's sometimes more optimum to be able to discuss it with people that are not part of your group already, your existing group, than it is people within that group.
That's a very true statement, provided that you have the level of trust in the group that allows you to share.
And how do you earn that? How do you reach that point of trust?
You earn, we talked earlier, you said, how do you pick people that fit in the group?
Right.
And that is a very, very key activity, that you look at someone, their background, the types of challenges they have, and you try and put them with companies of similar complexities. Make sure there's not too much of a generational difference within there, so the communication skills are similar, and then you try it out and you do it. The other thing that really helps to develop that trust, and is something that we're very, very key to ensuring happens, is usually when you meet, you check in not just on a business level, but you also check in on a personal level. So what's going on in your life? What's important to you? How are the wife and kids? What are those challenges that make you human? And in sharing that humanness, it develops and enhances the level of trust and understanding that will allow you both to give honest feedback and also to receive honest feedback from others.
So it sounds really good as a concept. Can you give us some specific experiences or examples, whether directly from yours or because of your affiliation with this kind of a structure, where you can say that, talk to us about successes with this type of thing?
I can. I'll talk to you about a success, and then maybe one that wasn't a success that,
there you go.
that I like to share. I'll go with the one that wasn't a success. There was a member who was a CEO of a mid-sized company, middle market company, and he wanted to bring his son in to be the CEO apparent into the company. And he brought this issue to the round table to his to the other members, and their advice to him was the guy wasn't ready. Let him go out and learn some other things in business before you brought him into the company.
In other words, have him do things outside of his company where he would find some experiences, get some other mentorship, stub his toe a few times.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. He chose not to follow that advice and brought him into the company, and it didn't work out very well at all. He ended up having to release his son with some financial ramifications, and as he says, and then I had to go home and be with his mother. So that's an example where it didn't work out.
It actually sounds like the peer group counseling was accurate.
It was.
But the member did not opt to
accept the advice.
Yeah, accept the advice.
That's correct. And that's one thing about an advisory board of your peers. It's still your business.
Yeah.
You're still responsible. You still get to make those decisions, right? But you get some good counseling, some good advice from people who care about your success.
It sounds like, though, that it's going to be important for the individual who is saying they want to participate in this to check their ego at the door, because you can listen to someone else say, we kind of think you ought to move in this direction, Larry, and Larry, if he's not willing to even hear that, you're not going to get anything accomplished with him. Is that?
We say learn, grow, and share, and to learn you do have to check your ego. And that's one of the pieces of advice that I tell people when they're looking either to be in an advisory board or to start a mastermind group, is that you can do this. You can go online and you can find all kinds of self-help on advisory boards and mastermind groups, and it'll tell you how to form your own. But my advice, is to find one that has professional facilitation. somebody who can manage those egos, somebody who can make sure that everybody participates, somebody that can keep you focused on solving problems and not just get into open-ended discussions, somebody who makes sure that the group and each individual member gets value. There are a lot of people who meet over coffee and have all kinds of discussions, but they're really not focused on solving problems. And that is the primary difference between what I call ad hoc activities and a professionally facilitated advisory board or peer advisory forum. Makes a big difference in actually getting value out of the group.
I can see how that would be, because someone is there who is somewhat external to the processes that are going on and can sort of be like a moderator and help keep things moving.
Absolutely.
Now, we have a graphic that has some information about advantages and the benefits of this type of a thing, and I thought maybe we could pull that up, because you've actually mentioned several of these things as we've been going on here, and you know, I'm going to ask a question that's really kind of crazy, because I'm in the sales industry, and when people ask me this question, I go, "What are you, stupid or something?" And it has to be, when you look at these, which would you identify as the more critical or more important advantages and benefits? And they're all relatively important, but are there certain things that jump out and say these are some of the core elements for advantage and benefits and value that you get out of this type of an experience?
There's a term that's used called magic, right? And magic has 5 letters, and there are 5 principles that are associated with those letters that I like to say really sort of talk to the essence. So the M is for making better decisions faster, and that can be through getting feedback on the inputs to your decisions, or it can just be, Dave, you're making the right decision, go for it. The confidence that you have by getting the feedback from a peer group. The second is A for accountability. So when you come in and you discuss a challenge, a topic, an issue, an opportunity, and you get feedback from your group, a professionally facilitated advisory board will say, okay, what are you going to do with the guidance and advice that you got? And it will ask you to make some general commitments about what you're going to do with that advice. And when you come back the following meeting, you'll get queried by your peers, okay, how did that go? What did you do? So they're going to be holding you accountable, and you know when you come back that they're going to ask you what you did. The G in magic is for grow. Everybody's trying to grow their business, and when you have a strategy that you're trying to come up with, you need feedback. When you're looking to differentiate yourself from your competitors, it's outside insight that will allow you to develop those differentiators, as opposed to going to an industry trade group where everybody's talking about the same thing.
I think that term you use, I'm going to restate that. It's outside insight. So someone who is outside of your specific environment that can look at it and say, well, what if you did this? You know, because they don't have all that, this is the way we do it, quote unquote, type of a thing from that. That's really cool. Okay, so that's M-A, that's what, G? Or was that I? That was I, insight, right?
No, I don't know. That was G for
G,
for growth.
For growth, okay.
I is for, okay, now you've got me here, for insight. Isolation, I is for isolation. Many times business owners or CEOs cannot talk to their staff about banking issues, about personnel issues, about things that are coming down from customers that may have an impact on the company. And they don't have someone to really talk to about those types of issues, who's been in their shoes, who sees things from the same perspective. When you're a large corporation, you have a board of directors, but middle market companies, and I'll say from $5 to $50 million, those business owners don't have a group of people they can talk to about those issues that isolate them at the top of the company. It may be that there's a personal issue. They've got a family issue that they've got to deal with, and it's impacting their business. How do they handle that? What are things should they be telling their staff? what are other people that they can talk to about those isolating issues?
Interesting.
Right? And the C is for change. One of the big things that business owners have to do is to drive change into their organization to keep them moving fast and up to the competitive level. So having insight and ideas on how to drive change into your organization become very, very valuable. So magic, better decisions, faster, accountability, growth ideas, address isolation at the top, and drive change into your organization.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to make a comment to the audience who are watching us right now, because my guess is that there are some questions that may be coming up. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that you can, if you look at the information under Glenn's face here, probably going to have an email address for him, but you can also send queries to info@referencepointtv.com. If you have any questions about this concept that we're talking about here for your company, your nonprofit organization, your church group, whatever it happens to be, ask the questions, send in those queries, and we'll get them answered for you. Okay.
Absolutely.
So you were saying you were going to give an example of one that worked and one that didn't work. So
right.
we talked about the one that didn't work.
We did. So recently, in one of the top executive forums, there was a member who had some issues with cash flow, right? And trying to get financing. And as it turned out, there was a previous credit issue by one of the members of his family that was impacting his ability to be bankable. And you're in the banking business. You definitely understand
how that works.
how those things work.
Indeed.
Right? And he brought this topic to the advisory board, and he got ideas such as to increase his prepayment for some of his services, to take some of his fixed costs like insurance and spread out those payments over the entire year, to be more aggressive in his accounts collectible. So just some very common sense activities that he was able to take away and implement within 30 days, and come back the next month and said, my cash flow issues have been resolved.
Fantastic.
Right? Okay, so just very, very tactical but effective feedback he got from the group.
Excellent. That's a great example. Well, I want to ask you, Glenn, about, someone gets involved and starts participating in a group like this. Is this like forever and always kind of grouping? I mean, what companies get bigger, they get smaller, they evolve or whatever. So how do you judge whether or not you just put one together and stay, or what do you do?
Very good question, Dave. And we talked a little bit about this earlier in making sure that companies of similar complexity were in the group. But what you find is that people develop personal relationships and trust, and they actually continue to value the peer feedback from somebody that they've grown with, even as their business has grown. Someone has watched them grow the business, understands who they are as a person, what's important to them from a values perspective, and they will continue to reach out for that insight. Typically in the industry, and this includes both our organization and others, members tend to stay on average 5 to 6 years in a group before it's time for them either to find another group because their business has grown, or it's time to move on to do something else.
Got it. You're very clearly passionate about this topic, this subject matter. Why?
In my background, I have done individual contributing things up to running organizations with 1,500 people and quite a few $100 million in revenue. But the most fun that I ever had when I was building smaller teams for activities where you had 50 to 200 employees, you're generating 30, 50, 70 million dollars in revenue, and trying to make those teams more productive, make them more valuable, and watch them grow really gave me a lot of satisfaction, and you might say floated my boat, for lack of a better term. And so to have the opportunity to watch business owners who are at those stages, watch their passion as they build their companies, as they care for their employees, and be able to contribute my experience and to help them do that, just it really lights up my life. Fantastic.
That's awesome. So I want to ask one other question. We're getting close to the end of the show here, but I suspect that there are people who are watching it are thinking, oh, maybe this might be something maybe doing, but there's this hesitation. You know, doing something like this and exposing yourself pretty much to others with respect to whatever your business knowledge or lack thereof is associated with your endeavor, that can be a scary thing. So how do you counsel? What would your counsel be to the people who are watching who are a little bit hesitant about maybe even putting themselves out at that level of risk?
I would ask them to think about the risks they took when they started a business, right? Because I'm typically working with business owners, presidents and CEOs, they tend to be risk takers. If you weren't a risk taker, you wouldn't have made it to that level, to be quite honest. And so what I guide and counsel them to do is to think about taking some time away from your business and taking a risk to develop yourself and to develop the insight and ideas you have that you can take back to the business. It's almost like taking some time off, a sabbatical where you're in deep thought and you come back with better insights than you did when you're in the day-to-day grind.
When you're doing that for a few hours, once a month or once every other week or something like that, depending upon the group and stuff like that. Very cool. Well, Glenn, I appreciate your coming to join me here on Reference Point, and I hope you folks in the viewing audience have learned something about this concept, because as much as we have heard this term thrown around many times in the business community, like I said at the beginning, I think most of us, myself included, did not have a full grasp or understanding about what it is, how significant it is, and what it can do. So,
I like to simplify things. Simpler is always better. And just think it's a safe and confidential place where executives, by working together, can learn, grow, and share in both their professional and their personal lives.
Fantastic. And with that, Glenn, thank you for being here at Reference Point. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.